Why are cats bad? Well, not those cats. I know why those cats are bad. But cats in general, why are they bad? There's this website called TV Tropes, which you should absolutely not access because as soon as you click on one link, you'll end up opening 5 others and spend an hour of your life reading about obscure media trends. But if you decide to ignore my warning and do it anyway, you'll see that it's a database of ideas and events that are often depicted in media. That's what a trope is, by the way. If a thing happens a lot in media, it's considered a trope. And what that website is trying to do, essentially, is catalog all of those notable repeating patterns in movies, shows, and the like. And if you take a look at their list of cat-related tropes, you start to notice that they tend to be a lot more negative than positive. Cats are mean, cats are snarkers, cats are the pets of evil masterminds, cats are secondary, cats are lazy. Now please click away from the website before you spend another hour in there. TV Tropes is not a perfect website, nor is it an accurate representation of every piece of media ever. But when you start to search through your brain, you start to see that they kinda have a point. Cats in Western media are, many times, considered villains. Whether it's because the cats themselves have an unpleasant or unhelpful personality, or because they are associated with evil people. At best, they are mysterious, albeit unhelpful, or they are the secondary character to a story that is about some other kind of animal, usually a dog. But this is not a video about dogs. It is about cats. Part of this phenomenon in cat depictions is easy to understand. In human-made fiction, we will, of course, characterize animals according to our own readings of their behaviors, filtered through our own very human sense of morals and values. An animal that just lies around all day will be called lazy, especially when compared to more active pets. Cats really have an elegant walk, which is easy to translate as regal or snooty. These stereotypes in media aren't exclusive to fiction, but instead they are merely a translation of how we understand and interact with different animals. Cats have a way of showing companionship that many perceive as introverted, and their own take on personal space can come off as inconsiderate, especially if you're not used to it. If you scroll back in history a little bit, you might remember tales of how cats were worshipped in Egypt. And if you scroll back even further, you might even recall the theory of how cats domesticated themselves, simply because they showed up around human settlements and stuck around by making themselves useful, such as by catching mice. Therefore, the idea that humans have been known for loving cats isn't revolutionary, and just because cats tend to have a bad name in fiction doesn't mean that there aren't cat people around anymore. But there has to be a reason why those negative tropes exist in the first place. If you fast forward a bit to the Middle Ages, you remember that cats were usually associated with witches, who, according to the good old Catholic Church, were evil and deserved to be burned. If witches were evil, their pets had to be evil too. And since witches were usually women, you can start to see why cats were also usually linked to female imagery. Something tells me that the church might just be anti-women, but that's a whole nother can of worms.
Witchcraft.
All I'm saying is that the amount of cat hate ended up growing from this point on. It's easy to twist a cat's natural chill attitude into scheming and plotting. And if you add a bit of nasty magic to it, you just found yourself a nice villain archetype. And then, if a cat is the bad guy, you might as well get yourself a good guy, which, as we all know, is usually the dog. If there's a story where a cat is being mean or arrogant, there's usually a nice noble dog to contrast them. You can straight up turn them into enemies, or you can just have each of them doing their own separate thing. But what the dog is doing is good, and what the cat is doing is evil. So you've got an animal that has this whole historical baggage of being considered the villain, and a huge part of it supposedly comes from an unwarranted bias spread by their opposers. And these preconceptions still affect the way we portray this creature in media to this very day. Let's put a pin on that idea, because now I want to take you on a journey to a future that is not so distant from our own, in a place that might as well exist today. Let's stroll into the fictional city of Nagasaki, because I want to talk about Isle of Dogs. Bet you weren't expecting that from a video about cats. Well, I'm just full of surprises that way. Once upon a time, there was a man named Wes Anderson, and he made a whole bunch of amazing movies. And then in 2018, he decided to venture once more into the land of stop motion and bring us Isle of Dogs. In a futuristic Japan, dogs were declared a public hazard as they became infected with a disease called canine flu. Because of this, the mayor declared that they must all be exiled with the rest of the garbage to a place known as Trash Island, where they would perish in isolation and never threaten another human with this illness. The premise works because it's inviting you to believe in a post-apocalyptic world where things have gone so backwards that we got to a point where we hate dogs. Nothing can be more indicative of a dark timeline than this. Obviously, Wes had no way of knowing what would become of 2020, but let's give the man some credit anyway. You soon realize that dogs were once loved in this universe too, long ago, but they are now shunned, and the movie treats this fact with great sorrow. It is absolutely partial to the dog side, because the people who are shunning them have ulterior motives. Canine flu is, in fact, a treatable illness, and a cure has just been discovered. But the mayor rejects the idea and has the scientist behind it killed. Also, he could keep the dogs off his territory. The people in power are not only against dogs, but they are also heavily associated with feline imagery, because every evil mastermind has a pet cat. The fable that opens the movie already makes this rivalry very clear, because cats were resentful of the fact that dogs were allowed into human society. And this ancient animosity culminated into cats, or at least the people associated with cats, banning dogs for good. All kinds of nasty stereotypes have been spread about dogs, saying that they are diseased, violent, and repugnant. The public believes this and is in favor of their exile. As we get to know the dogs, though, we see that they are the same loving and loyal pets we have always known them to be. And all the hatred comes from misinformation and prejudice. It's hard to look at this movie and not see it as some kind of real-life prejudice parallel, though it would be unfair to reduce it to being just that. You can look at the dogs in the film and see any people or group that has been misjudged, misrepresented, or exiled, even if the movie itself doesn't equate their dogs to one specific community. But the narrative of being negatively affected because of prejudice is one that can be applied to several real-life human equivalents, to put it lightly. As much as this is a movie about prejudice, it is also about how prejudice is wrong. And we know this because we know dogs to be good. We know this even before we see our dog protagonists, because it's a cultural idea that the audience already has. The movie doesn't have to waste time stating that dogs are good, and doesn't have to work hard to convince us that the anti-dog mayor is evil. But like I said, this is not a video about dogs. This is a video about cats. Which leads me to my main hot take here. Get ready, folks. Isle of Dogs should have been about cats. I kind of have to preface this by saying that I love Isle of Dogs, as I love Wes Anderson movies in general, and this one is executed so well on so many levels that I cannot bring myself to bash it. However, everything about this movie, from its core premise to its execution, could be strengthened by using cats instead of dogs. This is a movie with an anti-prejudice aspect that doesn't have to try very hard, because we all know dogs are good, so we know anti-dog people are evil. But think about how much more powerful the setting would be if it had cats instead, and they became infected with the feline flu, so the mayor decides to send them away. Thanks to the vast library of evil cat depictions in media, wouldn't you also feel more inclined to believe the rumors? I mean, a world where dogs are bad seems impossible, but how hard would it be to buy the idea that cats are bad, especially after having been fed this idea all of your life? We now have an animal that has been historically considered villainous as the face of our exile campaign, as opposed to one that is considered to be man's best friend. Now, the movie has to work a lot harder to make us believe that cats are not inherently bad, and that the anti-cat government is being unreasonable. All of this without relying on the audience's preconceived ideas regarding the species. This would be a type of trope subversion, which is when you take a trope and then do the opposite of what usually happens. In this case, making a cat the hero and a dog the villain. If you want to tell a story that falls back heavily on prejudice-related narrative beats in order to get its point across, then it would be a lot more thought-provoking if you had the audience question their pre-established beliefs, instead of relying on their cultural baggage. And sometimes that can be done with an action as simple as saying that cats are good. Now, I'm not attempting to claim that there have been no depictions of good or heroic cats in media, but when you look at the majority of examples, they tend to lean more towards the negative side. Cats are bad simply because we, as humans, choose to make them bad for the sake of narrative purposes. And there's nothing inherently wrong with writing a villainous or problematic character. Stories need conflict to be interesting after all. But if we stop to question our own beliefs and the reasons behind the choices we make in fiction, we might start to notice some patterns. And even if they are unintentional, they usually carry an entire historical baggage behind them. And much like the story of Isle of Dogs can be used to think about real-life human-related issues, the lesson in this video can also be used for the same purposes. I don't have to be the one to tell you that media has not been equally kind to all humans. Isle of Dogs isn't only about dogs, and this video about cats isn't only about cats. Cats in media don't have to be bad, but that choice, just like every other choice in media, is entirely in the hands of the people who make it. Thank you for watching. Wow, hello there. It was very nice of you to watch this video. If you have enjoyed the video, you can do those cool things such as clicking the like button, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the notification bell too. You can also follow me on Twitter and share this video with your friends. If you really like what I do, you should consider supporting me on Patreon. I have linked it down in the description and I highly recommend you check it out. Feel free to leave a comment down below, especially if it is about how much you love cats. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!
Mayor Kobayashi is a crook and I hate him.